being so interested in technology, I go to a lot of these tech events, and I've already seen software that can take, a hand sketch. We like to maybe call it like a napkin sketch.
Yeah.
They will, you meet an architect at a bar, and you start talking about your perfect dream house, and so he starts sketching on the back of a napkin there. Just an elevation, the front of your house, or whatever it looks like. But there's software now that can take that sketch and then interpret it into a 3D model within a matter of minutes.
I'd like to welcome you to the Corner Office Chronicles podcast. My name is Byron Benton, affectionately known as Byron the Product Enthusiast. This is dedicated to product management and entrepreneurship. So please, lend an ear, perhaps two. Tune into today's episode. All right, everyone. My name is Byron Benton, and I want to welcome you to the Corner Office Chronicles podcast. Again, my name is Byron Benton, and I am your host. Today, I have a special guest with me today. He may have built your favorite shopping mall. You never know. He might have built your favorite daycare. This is award-winning architect here. Please welcome Mr. Brandon Newkeld. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Byron, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh
Um,
man, thank you.
and just so everyone knows, I'm working on the architect title still here. Still got a couple more exams to go, but
Okay.
close enough. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about the correlation because there is a correlation. We're building things. We from the ground up. Let's say if someone builds a building or someone's building software. I think there's a correlation. So I thought this would be a great episode. If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been into architecture?
I've been practicing for close to 15 years. And before then, though, I was still a kid in high school sketching buildings and um, just all sort of creative stuff. So I've been into it for quite a while, even longer than then. So maybe around like 20 years. I
Oh
don't
wow,
know.
oh wow, wow, wow. So what was it about it that you maybe put some Lego blocks together as a kid, maybe, and just like, you know what, I like to build stuff, or was it maybe a parent that built, you know?
Um, well, no, I definitely love Legos. But I always had an interest in both art, and it started with just like actually drawing cartoons and stuff, and kind of grew into like fine art, painting, hand sketching. I love charcoal too, is one of my favorites. But then on the other flip side of that was I had a big interest in science and more technical
Mhm.
things, and I eventually at some point I realized, that architecture is like a nice blend of art and science, or art and engineering. Um, my great grandfather had a wood shop, and I used to visit my grandparents, so I'd also, just be interested in the crafting
Mhm.
nature of it too. So,
Okay, okay. Let me ask you, what inspired your love? Well, you kind of touched on it, but software in general. Where at what point you know what, this is pretty cool. I could put this with technology.
well, that happened when I was in college. My second year became like required to have a laptop computer,
Mhm.
right? So that was actually like my first introduction to it, but I was very quick at learning. And soon I was picking up, different kinds of 3D modeling software, um, Rhino, 3D Max, Formz, basically whatever I could get my hands on that would allow me to take um, what was just a concept in my head and turned it into some kind of reality. So I'd say modeling was my introduction into um, technology and how it can be used in architecture or in design in general.
Yeah.
And then later on, that transition for into digital fabrication, where you actually take those models and you create real things with
Wow.
it. And That sort of led my whole interest in technology, from there. Um,
Okay. What are some of the similarities that you see? Because I really like the conversation we had last time. We spoke about different systems, and we'll get into different systems. The body itself. We spoke about some of the systems, etc. What are some of the similarities you think between architecture and maybe product design, software making design?
Well, I think it's not a coincidence that architecture is also a term in product design and technical
Yeah.
electronic engineering, that you have to think of things in terms of systems.
Uh,
There's there's a hierarchy, and there's an approach you have to take to it where it's all problem solving. When you get down to it, you're asking yourself, what can I accomplish within um, these boundaries or these guidelines or with this budget, and then also what is the client hoping to get out of this, what's their aspirational goals. So it's being able to take those concepts and aspirations and make it into something real, and that's a skill that I think is shared among all the design um, professions.
I think so as well. I think so. Definitely a correlation. What about as far as planning um and product that's planning as well, but could you please explain the architectural planning, how it goes?
Well, yeah, there's planning is a big part of it because that's what helps you arrive at the right uh, design question. In architecture, we always look at it as in terms of what is the question that we're solving for. So you have to have a plan in order to get to that point, right? So it's talking about what the end users need. That might be even some interviews like you might have in UX design. They do something similar in architecture where we're asking um, maybe the residents of a new housing development, what they'd like to see amenity wise. You also ask like the client what they'd like to have in that space as well. Um, and then you also have to look at what is the context, what is the neighborhood want in their neighborhood, in their space, and what is the city willing to allow you to build. So there's a lot of feedback that comes into the project before you even get to design anything.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So we spoke a little bit about the residents. So that takes me back to products and we'll say clients, customers, feedback. Once they give that feedback, how do you decide what to act on? What if they want 10 different things? Is there a list, a priority list of things? Maybe this is more important than this. We do this first and then work down. Or,
Yeah, well, what to say, that's pretty regular. A big wish list, and then maybe just a smaller budget or amount of time they can work on. So, what architects are really skilled at too is being able to filter out down to what would be the most like impactful changes you could make. You have to be able to separate what is a need versus a nice to have, and then also consider what is most likely to happen with the resources you have. So, if you have a local a project and it's with the government agency, say, and they have a very limited budget, and they're asking for things, like we'd like a 40-story tower with glass facade and elevators. You have to sort of um, give them the advice of like this is what can actually happen, and this is what we probably can't do at least at this run here. So it is managing expectations is really key, and but also like sometimes you bring stuff to the table. Actually, architects like to say that the client doesn't know what they want until we show it to them in a way, right? So we take what they tell us, what they're interested in, and we try and give it vision for how we see it coming together.
okay, okay, okay. Now, when it comes to product, a lot of times it's considered an agile environment. Things change, budgets change. people change. Is it the same when it comes to architecture? Let's say if someone's building a house. I mean, I'm sure a budget could. I've seen people build houses before and they sit on it for 2 months, I guess, until they get the money going again. How how
Yep.
uh how do people manage those changes, those challenges, let's say in the architectural space?
Changes happen all the time. And the fact that architecture projects can take so much longer than, let's say, a digital project, right? It can take a year or two or more just to build a single family house. Sometimes you get budget changes, like let's say, for instance, right now we have the issue. I'm gonna call. Um, so you have pricing issues with materials coming in because they're coming from abroad, and there's a tariff on steel or something. It is pretty common for the architect to have to go back and adjust the design to fit current situations. And even if it's a client and they just decide, hey, I'd like to have, a pool outside instead of the, tennis court or something. Again, that's something that we have to be willing to um, go along with, within reason, right? You can't do it while it's in construction. They can't just say like in a week, I'd like this without significant charges. But we're here to, uh, you know, please the client get the stuff completed to where they would like it, and then that involves adjusting kind of frequently. So,
Okay, so the thing with software, and we speak about the correlation between the two, and that definitely is a correlation because we building, we did design it. The thing with product, let's say if when it's finished, people don't like it, you could always, you know, make a change in code, uh, change in design, make a screen red, and I guess you could do this the same thing with architecture. But what if someone, let's say if someone, builds a house and they say, yeah, yeah, yes, we want this house. We want this. This is what we want built. This is exactly what we want built. And then at the very end, when they see it in person, they like, no, I don't like it because we can't rebuild it. At that point, I mean, it's a lot of planning, a lot of resources
yeah.
went into that.
Well, that comes to the other important part of our profession is communication. So we just try and make sure that the client is up to date on what design changes and decisions have been made throughout the process, so that it's not a surprise. Um, you can't do that all the time. Sometimes even just thinking about technology again, you can render something on a computer and it looks a certain way, and it's not going to look that way 100% when it's actually in place, because it all has to do with lighting and where you're at in the country and location. And so those surprises happen. Um, but you just have to be willing to kind of explain it, and hopefully you have a forgiving client, as long as it's not getting in the way of you know what they want to see in their space. There's always going to be some surprises. Hopefully they're good ones.
What's the most important part? Because I think when I deal with a product, we think we see the UI and we only see the front end, but there's a lot of really important stuff that goes on the back end as well, databases and things of that nature. What about architecture? When it comes to architecture, what's the most important part of a building?
Well, one of the most important guidelines for being an architect is that the health and welfare of our clients and the people that we're working for. So there's a lot of design that goes into homes and other buildings that you don't even see.
Mm.
In terms of fire safety, you have, plumbing situations you want to be aware of. There's all kinds of systems that have to come together in the right way so that you have both a beautiful space and a functional, safe space that will last for, 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Um, that requires a lot of investigation.
Yeah, I know. Which brings me to my next question, which is kind of like the cousin of the question I just asked. How can we make sure a building is both beautiful and functional? The same way we would in product. We want it to be beautiful for the front, but but the underworkings want to be beautiful as well, you know.
Well, I'd say it's the same approach as you have with something like this, like an iPhone here. There's so much more work has gone into this product
Hmm.
than what you could ever imagine just
Hmm.
picking it up at a store, right? It's it takes a lot of work and vigorous design studies. Um, and it you all have to make it look seamless, make it look easy in a way, right? That's You don't want to have the client come in to the building unless they're on the tech side and they want to see the electronics or the structure behind the house. So that is a something that some clients like too. You know, especially with the industrial spaces, you can see behind me. I like to kind of see that stuff, but overall, it takes a lot of work, attention to detail, and really focusing on both the overall and then also how things come together to get that holistic space, or product, you could say.
Yeah, yeah. So let's think of software in the product space, kind of like a building. So let's take a building as a because one of the conversations I really like me you had last time we spoke about living organisms and systems of the body and things of that nature. So let's think of building as a body, and let's say the software, the front end of software is the skin, the back end is the organs, and
Hmm.
data is the bloodstream. Is
Yeah.
if
Hmm.
similar thing to what would you consider to each one? Um, what's the bloodline or what's the skin? I guess probably the walls be the skin. I'm sure.
Well, I mean, you have like even a wall is an assembly, right? So you have the drywall, the face, the paint, plaster, but behind it you have the structure, which is the studs, the bones, the skeleton. That's what's keeping the piece together, and within there you have your plumbing, electrical systems too, which again they're going to their own inputs and outputs, um, which is like our nerves, and that way it's sending information or electricity or water to where it needs to go. So it's all it's I think you really get to dig into the design problems when you get to that small scale too in assemblies. And for me in architecture, that comes down to detail drawings. We have entire sheets of details at the end of a set, which is not what the client usually looks at. But when you're, an expert at what you're doing and you really enjoy the design process, it can be just as fun to dig into those details and to figure out how things work behind the skin, and underneath this structure of the space. And
Okay,
uh,
so let's think about the maintenance
mhm.
let's say a building, because when it comes to apps, let's talk about let's say debugging, cleaning, upgrading, things of that nature. Well, how can we? What would be the maintenance of like something like a building?
It depends a lot on what the building is made of. Is if it's
Yeah.
um, concrete, if it's glass, obviously you're going to have to clean that a lot. If it's stick built, like we have wood siding. It's popular here in the Bay Area. We have like a lot of wood shake housing where you've got nice redwood um, tiles, but they have to be sealed every 10 or so years too. So maintenance is key to the performance of a building, and then um, as an architect, you would try to design um, your spaces to actually be less of a stress on those materials as well. So like if you're designing a roof, you want to make sure like the water is running off and away from the side of the building. So there's less maintenance issues, right? So that goes into the design itself too. Um, that's just what I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay. No. No. Well, how do you think the future of of buildings will change. Do you think AI is going to have an impact the same way it does on, or is currently having on software design? Do you think there's going to be some AI uh, tool that comes out that can design a house and it probably could do the blueprint already, I'm sure. I wouldn't be surprised, you know.
Well, yeah, in the Bay Area, I've actually seen a lot of that, being so interested in technology. I go to a lot of these tech events, and I've already seen software that can take, a hand sketch. We like to maybe call it like a napkin sketch.
Yeah.
Say, well, you meet an architect at a bar and you start talking about your perfect dream house. And so he starts sketching on the back of a napkin there, just an elevation, the front of your house or, whatever it looks like. But there's software now that can take that sketch and then interpret it into a 3D model within a matter of minutes, you know.
Wow.
And, it's like Dolly and some of the other software too. It's not perfect, right? But it'll give you like 10 iterations of it. You
Mm-hmm.
can kind of rotate it and be like, oh, yeah, that looks close to what I'm thinking about. And that's something you can hand off to your client. But later on, I think what AI is going to actually really help out with are the real complex building structures and in coordination. At least I hope so. I don't want it coming from my job just yet. Um, all right, I hope I've worked on like projects for airports and you know, um, uh, rides at Disneyland and stuff. And there's a lot of complex equipment coming together in one place. And so I could see AI being a tool in noticing where there's conflicts even before someone sets a drawing. Maybe it's AI in a headset, and you can look at how things are coming together, and then you sort of just adjust it real time.
Hmm.
Everything else adjusts with it. That's where I hope it leads for AI and becomes more of a tool than a hindrance.
Yeah, I wonder with something like product software, you can always go ahead and make a change with a house or a building. It seems like it's much harder to go. Well, I guess it's not because they have the standard, and excuse me if I'm wrong, but the with some two by fours, depending on the it has an internal structure as well. So I guess it's not too hard to go in and make a change. But do you think there's AI will present a error rate? Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, it's not perfect, and honestly, if you go back to if you think if you go back to architectures being a mix of art and science, okay, maybe at one point AI is perfect in the science mode, which it isn't anyway. But I could see it. It's numbers, and if it can, figure that out, that'd be great. But in terms of art, even if it can mimic what other architects do and what other artists do, it's not really going to be art in the same sense because it's not coming from any sense of, passion or it's, your ideas. It you can feed words into something like Dolly and say you want it to have this emotion, but that thing on the other end doesn't understand anything what you're saying other than what it's been able to glean from online or whatever, right? So it's always going to be an art form, I think.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
it requires some finer hands there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let's say in product management, let's say a product manager will depends on what type of product manager, but typically, someone that has good strategy, good innovation, creativity, someone that has great communication, and other things as well. Someone that could work well with different teams. And what makes a great architecture? A great architect.
Well, that's important. What you brought up there, a lot of people, when they think of architects, they think of the starchitects. Yeah, I don't know if you heard of that term, like star architect.
Okay. Okay.
But Frank Gehry, Mies van der Rohe, you have a lot of these big names. Um, but the real good ones will let you know that the what they've created is actually product like of teamwork, right? They're they have an entire team of people who are helping them to get to these ideas, and it's very requires a lot of collaboration.
Yeah.
multidisciplinary communication. Um, and that's kind of a whole, side hustle in itself, in that, architects hopefully are great communicators, if they're successful, and that's all part of it, being a team.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. 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 What are some let's just speak about design. I know you have to go. We can wrap it up. What are some of the how can we get better? How can someone be better as an architect? Product managers, of course, can read, get mentors. I imagine it's the same thing with architecture. How can someone be a better? How can someone be basically? How can someone learn how to design better? Okay.
Yeah, I think it comes down to looking beyond, your current set of problems. And, I touched base on this earlier when we first talked, but it's looking at for inspiration outside of, your own job. Let's say it's, you do find an interesting problem in biology, or, space travel, or something like that. Coming up with different ways to challenge yourself,
Mhm.
uh, and then to come up with different ideas. And for any creative profession, I think, it's easy to kind of hit that blank page, that empty drawing you have, and you just aren't able to come up with anything. So sometimes, it's necessary to think outside of the box. It's a little cliche now,
Yeah.
but, just think about your wildest ideas, get it out on paper, define it, get the concepts down. And I think the important thing is to realize that design is about lifelong learning, right? You're always a student of the world, and you should always be willing to take in new ideas. And I
Okay.
think that'll lead to
Definitely.
better design.
Definitely. Well, so what are some good books? We spoke about the human body, etc. What are just some good books in general that talk about systems, designs, whether it's dealing with the body or dealing with architecture, or even ones that you know about product software product.
Um, well, there's one of them I like is Design Like You Give a Damn,
Mm.
um, which it's a few years old now, but it might have been updated. But a lot of it is like real problem solving design, mostly architecture,
Mm.
solving problems, that we have today, like with, rising floodwaters, or, droughts, or um, population control. So that's a good one. And then kind of off topic though, or away from architecture, there was oh, oh, my bad. That's not who I was looking for. Um, yeah, I didn't have my list of books
Yeah,
on hand here, but as you can see, I've got a I read a lot. There's
yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. There's
always pick up something that looks interesting, and
yeah, yeah. Any podcasts you like?
um, well, quick shout out to there's 99% Invisible, which is set here in Oakland.
Mm.
Um, he's done by an architect himself. Roman Mars, I believe, is the name, and he looks at, again, that all of the design and thought that goes into things that is 99% invisible in a sense, and then you only see the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Okay. Okay. All right. And one of my last questions. What's your favorite app? With how and speak about how you think it was, how well you think it was designed, and why you like it.
Um, you know, uh, I'd like to say it was some cool design tool app, which I have, but honestly, my favorite app is just the photo app on my phone.
Okay. Why you
Right?
like
Because it allows me to take a quick snapshot of something that I'm looking at, and later in the day when I'm looking through it, I can take those photos and put it into a note if I want to, or I can just make it a visual experience. I can sketch over those later on.
it?
Um, but uh, that's actually, part of how I got into tech and working, with Apple as I did is I just got kind of fascinated with the iPhone when it came out.
Uh,
Like I have a phone, I have a camera here. I can record video, and honestly, that sort of changed
mhm.
my way of life, and for a lot of people as well, just having that camera in your pocket ready to record whatever you're seeing, and you can look at it later on. You
All
know,
right, all right. You technical like the rest of us. Everybody, it's a technical generation, technical world right now.
right?
If people want to reach you, how can they do so? If you
You can find me on LinkedIn, Brandon Newkelt, Nuckelt, or I'm on Instagram as a Snarkitect.
Okay. All right. I like that. That's branding, self-branding. That's part of that's part of marketing and product management as well. So what this is the very last question. What advice do you have for any body that wants to kind of bridge those two worlds together? Maybe design product with maybe the way an architect may look at it.
I'd say just go to events and meet people. One of my favorite things to do in the city, actually, living in San Francisco, is to find a meetup um, on LinkedIn or like a newsletter where it's something similar to what you're working on, but a different crowd, and then go and just talk to people, have conversations, because I think you'll learn more in that 15-minute conversation than you would find in hours of going down rabbit holes online. Right. So those personal connections, I think, are always a lot more valuable. And then they'll tell you some books and podcasts to read too, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much. I think we did a great job of bridging the two together, architecture when it comes to building buildings and building applications. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's been a pleasure to speak to you today, sir.
all right. Thank you, Byron. Looking forward to seeing this.
Oh, no problem. You will. You will.
So thanks for watching today's episode of the Corner Office Chronicles podcast. Again, my name is Byron Benton, and I am your host, affectionately known as Byron the Product Enthusiast. Please like, subscribe, and tune in. Until the next time, thanks for watching.